This is the Unscripted Podcast.
All right, guys, we're good to see y'all today. Or actually, we're glad y'all can see us. You remember the video we made, Bob, during COVID?
Which one?
The one we were going to make for the church, for the Stronger Now, and we shot it in the
walking in our seats and
that one. But we were shooting like the video to let people know that we're getting ready to do this thing together, and we were just going to do this like whatever it's called, where you just get up and do it, basically like the podcast. And I said, "Hey,
not
church."
The one that where Ben was videoing our feet walking in.
No, the one that we shot in front of the Lord's Supper table, and I was like,
okay, yeah.
I'm so glad you could see me, and you kind of looked at me like, weird like that. That's still on that video. We'll have to air that video sometimes.
I don't care. We can air whatever. There's a bunch of comical behind the scenes stuff that we've done.
That's right. That's right. All right. So we started last week on our this kind of, I say last week, a couple of weeks ago, on this series about how do you know if you're part of a dying church or not, and we looked at some high level stuff, and then we just looked at some certain dangers that a churches, we looked at those churches in Revelation, and we did some quick math, and we said that they were at best 50 years old, and the Lord's already telling them. What was he telling them?
Yeah, you gotta shape up. There's something you need to do. That there's kind of their principle that the Lord does for every one of those churches is he does this, what I call the sandwich effects. He gives them a piece of bread. Let's kind of soft move into this thing. Then he gives them some meat. This is what you need to change. And then he gives them another piece of bread. He who overcomes. And every single one of those churches and those letters, he said, he who overcomes, I shall give, either the crown of life, or I'm going to give to eat from the tree of life. Not going to take away his robe, those kind of things. And man, it's we got to be live and vibrant. And by the way, we want this. We need our listeners' help with this podcast. First of all, if you're listening today, I hit up a person today that I didn't know had been listening to our podcast, and I was sending something out to them from back in the site, the one we were coming back, and they said, "Yeah, we've been listening for 2 years, and glad y'all are back at it." Well, I think that I knew that they'd been listening, but I didn't know that they were like listening regularly, all the time. And so, if you're listening today, just comment. Where are you listening from? We'd like to hear where you're listening from. What state
on Spotify or Facebook or whatever. I was having a Bible study at my house Friday night. We study with two families on Friday nights at my house, and one of them held up their phone and was like, "Look at you getting all fancy. This is something I learned. This is so just so you guys know kind of the behind the scenes, the way this thing worked." And Bob and I were at KW together. Like I had my part, Bob had his part, Ben had his part, and I would try to, make sure we kind of stayed up on our technology. That's why you saw the lower thirds come in and stuff like that, kind of pop into our thing. Just trying
YouTube.
on YouTube and stuff like that. But Bob would always upload the episodes. Yeah, we used to do Anchor. Yeah. When we first started this with the Ministry League, if you don't have that app, download it. You can catch us on the Ministry League. A lot of great information on there. And
go to podcast, and we're at the bottom.
Yeah, somebody's got to bring up the rear. I just like to say we're pushing, Bob.
Yeah,
and you don't push from the front.
Up,
that's right.
Pushing them up.
And we were doing Anchor, and then Anchor kind of got absorbed by Spotify or something like that. I don't know the logistics of how it worked. But anyway, so, I taught Bob how to do this part, and then I forgot how to do it. So Bob had to teach me how to do this part again. Well, I messed it up last week, Bob. I don't know if you caught this or not, but I accidentally, when I noticed
everything.
Your kids don't believe that, though. When I uploaded it last week, I forgot to do the thing where you convert it to just an MP3, and I accidentally just uploaded the whole video. So it took it, and now we inadvertently learned this was one of those accidental good things that you upload the video and you get the video. You can do the video or the audio on it.
Yeah,
and so
they increased it when Spotify, I guess, ate Anchor or whatever, however you want to call it, they consumed them, took it over. That feature became available, and but it was it was hit and miss just 5 months ago. So hopefully they've got all the bugs worked out of it.
Yeah, I don't know, and I still don't listen to. I still don't watch many video podcasts. I mean, there's a few of them that I may look at, but most of them I just listen to on my headphones or
out doing work or something.
yeah,
or
on my Harley.
Trip,
My Harley's a good place for it. It's funny when you pull up to a stoplight and people want to incline their ear to see what you're listening to. And I told Steve Higginbotham at Polishing the Pulpit a couple of years ago, I was like, you and I got something in common. He said, what's that? I said, we're the only two people that at 5:30 in the morning, people's looking at us as a stoplight because we're talking about unwed mothers in the youth group on our Harley. And he said, I had never been on no Harley talking about that. I said, you have on mine. And so
yeah, you weren't even riding, but
you're with me.
You're playing.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, so today this podcast is meant to one, if you're a part of a dying congregation, we want to give you a boost. Two, if you know of a dying congregation, we want you to be able to encourage people. And then also thinking about this is that we some churches, as we talked about recently, is that you can have 300 people and still be dying. And so we want to talk about some practical things as well as just some, there's when you're showing up and there's no life and there's nothing happening and there's no growth, and there's just
well, let's discuss those things. Yeah,
they see the writing on the wall.
Well, let's discuss what we're talking about here because we talked about a little bit last week about churches that were rural churches and stuff like that. There's a lot of numbers about churches of Christ shutting their doors, shuttering the doors, as it were. We talked about last week the Get Well Church, in Memphis that has been certainly a major component of the church with, some things over the last real century and a half. And so what happens is with this is that, they have to bolt the door eventually. Well, that does not necessarily always mean that the church is dead. Well, let me explain that. That may mean that the church is relocating. That may mean that the church's membership are going to a different location. There's a need to shut the doors for whatever reason. There could be a disaster. If we're honest with ourselves, the Get Well congregation, being what you say, is not in a really good spot anymore, neighborhood wise.
Not at all. There's a lot of crime and definitely poverty just around that area.
Yeah, and so and I'm not saying that we need to avoid crime and poverty. But there's
we do need to avoid crime and poverty. We need.
I mean, with the gospel, take the
gospel in those areas, and we do, and there's some low hanging fruit there, but there's also big challenges. But anyways, go ahead.
And so there's we don't always paint the right picture when we say they're closing, right? But however, let's be honest. Let's just be honest. Most congregations, exist somewhere where there's a town, there's a place, there's a location where people are there. And, we hang our hat on John 3:16. God loved us so much he gave us Jesus that we just got to believe in him to get to heaven. But we forget that one chapter later when he's in Samaria and the disciples are saying like, well, I can't even figure out why you did this for. And he says, boys, verse 35, lift up your eyes, the fields are wide unto harvest. And either John 3:16 is true and John 4:35 is not, or either both of them are not true or both of them are true. There's only three conclusions you can come to there. And
which two verses did you say? I was thinking about
John 3:16.
And then what's the other one?
John 4:35.
Yeah. Right. Lift up your eyes. Yeah.
Yeah. For the fields are wide unto harvest. Right. And so either John 3:16 is true and John 4:35 isn't, or both of them aren't true or both of them are true. There's only three conclusions you can come to, and I hope that you come to the fact that that both are true, because if it does, and you really believe that, it's going to motivate you. And so, when you look at that we talked about last week, this idea of what happens, where do we get with congregations? How do we end up in this place? Because, you can look at a congregation and they could be swelling, but that don't mean that they're really growing. See, there's a difference between swelling and growing. Swelling is when, you're filling up, but you're not really growing. You can retain water and be swelling, but not really growing.
Yeah, that's right. And when talking about John 3:16, here's something that here's what people don't know about John 3:16, and I'll make this a blanket statement because most people that claim Christianity do not know this about John 3:16. When he says that whosoever believes in him, or if your King James says believeth in him, that word believes is a verb.
Yeah,
and so little education for people from country boy perspective is nouns are people, places, things, or ideas. And so this believe is not an idea that whoever has the idea of believing in Jesus should not perish but have everlasting life. But it's whoever has a verb form. Well, verbs are, I was explaining this last night. I had one of them shop Bible studies and with a 17-year-old boy. He's, troubled life. Now he's living with his brother in a stable position. And this is, I guess, I don't know, third Bible study or something with him. And he's 34th, and he's, and other guys are in on this study too. And so I asked him last night, I said, well, because the first study I had with him, I said, there's people who we study with who are all over the map. And where are you at when it comes to your faith, and then he said, I'm on the shallow end. I don't really know much about the Bible, but I'm willing to learn. And man, that's amazing. So I asked him last night, because we did a few studies on the authority of God's word and that kind of thing. So I said, what do you want now? Do you want more evidence-based stuff, or would you want to study about salvation? He said, I want to study about salvation. I said, all right. So we were talking about John 3:16 and this verb form. And I said, so tonight we drove to the barn and to the shop. And I said, so what's the noun? He said, shop. I said, what's the verb? He said, drove. I said, exactly. I said, we drove. So that whoever believes in him, that is our verb form. And so it is an action form of faith that you're actually living out. And so that's the first thing that's really that's the litmus test that's wrong with the church, is that if you're in a dying church, here's your first sign, is that there's no movement. There's no
Yes, absolutely.
That's going on.
Here's an interesting way that I show that, because it's funny you say that. I just did the same thing last Tuesday. Tyler, and I'm going to just go ahead and say their name, Tyler and Jana, they've been studying with us and another family. And
it was awesome. Got that message where, Tyler's baptizing, Did
he send it to you?
No, somebody else did, and I'm sending it to him. So
this family this is how
It's a cool story, y'all. Listen to this.
This is a blessing, because this family was peripherally connected with our congregation, through various means. There was no need to talk about the way that they're connected, but they were connected with us. And when we started doing the Next Tech Academy a couple years ago, their son, was part of our, our Next Tech Academy. You can check us out on Instagram and Facebook. But just as it goes, schedules just become a challenge, and I can't.
Y'all, Next Tech Academy, just briefly for those of you that don't know, it's not like a school academy. What this is a machine shop academy where people are learning about the Bible and machining and defending their faith at the machine shop. And so anyways, that's a little bit about Next Tech. Go check it out and keep going. So this boy was a part of it.
Yeah. And so, when, and I appreciate that, by the way you said that, and because maybe I didn't painted in the best picture, but
because I told the truth. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, I appreciate it, but we start each class with a study for that reason, because we want them to be able to defend their faith. You come to church to build it, you go to the world to defend it. That's just the way it should be. That's the model that the Lord had designed. And sometimes we do that backwards. Sometimes we come to the church and think we're really doing good by defending the faith here. Okay, I get you. There's a time where we defend the faith here. And I'm going through a series of lessons here on our Sunday night that you can check us out, that, we're studying this intertestamental period. I don't know that in the church I've ever studied it before. What happened? Where did all the scribes and Pharisees come from?
What does that mean? What is it? Because I don't know.
It's the period between Malachi and what would be called Malachi,
the 400 years,
the silent years. Exactly. I just been going through and just showing all
dead, but God didn't speak for 400 years, pretty much.
Exactly. He didn't have a vocal spokesman, but where do the scribes, the Pharisees, the Sadducees? How do we know? Like last Sunday night, we talked. How do we know assuredly that the Old Testament is the only thing I can get through that we have is the same one they used in the day that Jesus was here. And I just used a lot of Bible prophecies, verses that God said, this is the thing that you can know. And I said, first and foremost, I will prove this historically, that there is no shadow of a doubt that this is that we have what is there historically. However, I don't want you to put your faith in how well I can prove it historically. I want you to put your faith in what God said, that I will always preserve my word. The heaven and earth will pass away. My word shall, all these things, the word of the Lord endures forever. All these things. I wanted to point that out first. Well, we sometimes, and there's a time and place in the church to do that. But, with our Next Tech Academy, the idea was that, when Carson and Aiden and all these other kids, Gabe and Henry and Jay, all these kids are coming, that what we'll do is we'll start each class with a study so that they can learn these biblical principles. What is faith? What is repentance? Can we know the scriptures are inspired? Can we know that the difference in the old and the new law? That way they can, and how to kind of like be able to explain those things in a way that doesn't sound weird, that you can really get it out there. Well, so
back to Tuesday night. So you're studying this with Tuesday night.
Yep. So Tuesday, this kid had been part of our Next Tech Academy, and schedules, you just can't provide it for everybody. It just works out that way. Well, so he had kind of fallen off, from a schedule conflict. Well, now you got to remember, this is talking about the Lord shooting arrows here, how he starts these things way behind us, and we we hit the target with it.
And it's like, oh wow, there's another one that the Lord's sending.
Exactly.
He's coming in with their support.
Well, I was on Facebook. By
the way, prayers for Israel and all that's going on over there too.
Amen. They're their only Democratic neighbors, allies over there. Well, this family, I was on Facebook one night, and it was somebody who's like, your friend such and such commented, this guy's a little bit crazy. And so I was like, okay, let me see. This may be interesting to just see what he said on Facebook. And he was commenting on this post. There was somebody that wanted to know, I'm looking for a church in our area that has these kind of criteria. And it was really interesting, the things that they were looking for. And everybody on there was just kind of blasting. I'm like, you ain't gonna find out here. Get out of our town, And I thought, well, what kind of environment? So I just said, hey, I just sent her a link, and I don't even know if it was you or I preaching that Sunday, but I just sent him a link to the last week's service, and I said, I probably sent him yours because yours are better, but I sent him a link to the last week's preaching, and I said, hey, I think we can check your boxes. Well, they showed up Wednesday night, been here ever since, and
so the only person who's you got what you're talking about, somebody who sometimes says things that are crazy, that are, and they're commenting on them and defending the faith on
that's
there
right.
as well.
And just think about the only reason I caught that was because they said something on there. I wouldn't have necessarily caught that. I don't spend a lot of time on Facebook, so I don't necessarily catch these things. When I catch them, I try to. And I'm thankful a lot of people in our area are still asking for, hey, is there a church? Is it, this and that and the other? And I try to hit those, and I'm sure I miss them. But
what was neat too is during this part. So these people end up showing up to church, and then they realize, okay, we've got connections through kind of a child that had happened through through a family, and so now then you and Tyler and Jana and Jessica are studying with these people, and Tyler and Jana had connections with them.
That's right. And my oldest boy Aiden, because Aiden, while he did quit the Next Tech, or couldn't do it anymore, I should say quit. It sounds like harsh, but couldn't do it anymore. He's on the same basketball team as Aiden. So him and Aiden play basketball together. And so
what was neat though, Tyler was telling me is, and I think you had mentioned this to me too, was that the mama wanted you to study with the kids. And then, listen, y'all, this is what you need to decide whenever people say we want to study with you. We want you to have a study with our kids. Study with the parents and the kids at the same time.
Yeah.
Because what ended up happening, Tyler was telling me about it. He said, she goes, I don't know if I'm saved or not.
Yeah, I mean,
and she's like, I was taught all backwards, and so now I'm hearing the truth, and then now Mama's the one who's responding to the gospel.
That's right, and because when she came, it was actually her little, she's got one that's Bo's age. Bo's be 10 in a couple weeks, and so this little girl's, I don't know, that 8, 9, 10 years old age.
Bo's 10 and looks like a 13-year-old. Don't even.
Yeah, and eats like one, and you have to buy britches for him for one. But Bo,
we saw Bo's twin in Cowan, Tennessee, though, not the Mexican restaurant.
Was he wrestling a steer?
Got a picture, but the kid would have never known. I'm telling you, mannerisms, back of his head, side of his face, just like Bo.
Well, she wanted me to study. She was like, my daughter, she never said her name. She's 8 or 9 years old, 10 years old, whatever. Like, she keeps talking about wanting to be baptized, and she said, can we have that conversation with her? And I was like, I got an idea. Why don't I just help you understand about it really well, and then you can have isn't it more powerful for mama to have that conversation than me?
Absolutely.
That's what I asked her. She was like, yeah, that is. I was like, okay, so let's do this. So we set it up, and then she was like, her oldest son, she was like, he was even asking me the other day, like, this guy was doing the Lord's Supper talk and talking about examining yourself, and the boy said, I don't know if I'm right or not. I said, bring him. We'll have the conversation with him. Well, I got Aiden in on the conversation so that Aiden at basketball could do the drip, and not the dribble, but the drip.
Dribble and drip.
Yeah, and so we're studying along, and the son says, well, wait a minute now. I think I got this backwards. And Mama says, we got it backwards. Us saying this little prayer on the Church of the Baptist the Baptist church steps, and then getting baptized a month later, that ain't what the Bible says. And then she stopped talking to me and started talking to the wall, and she's like, I'm not doing the Lord's Supper right. What do I do? And I said, that the waterworks is coming, and you're and I was so glad Tyler was there, because these moments, Bob, you've been there 100 times, are awkward. I mean, but you can't say anything, and you just have to sit there in silent. And so Tyler, he's sitting there in the middle, and she said, well, I need you to, what do I need to do? I said, you know what you need to do. What did the Bible say? And she said, well, I need to do this, and I'm lost. And I just looked at her and I said, you don't have to leave here that way. And that's all I said. I didn't say another word. And it was just, you could hear a pin drop and the tears.
And y'all, when you're doing a Bible study and you can hear the pin drop, let the pins keep dropping.
Yes.
And don't say a word.
Yep. Because
listen.
Yeah, because when she said, I don't know what to do. I'm just scared. And I was like, and before I said, you don't have to leave here that way, actually what I said first was, just be glad the word's working on your heart. And she said, well, I'm lost. I said, you don't have to leave here that way. And I just stopped. Well,
yeah, you're so good at that, Chris.
And Tyler, well, I don't mean it gets any easier. It just, you just know what to expect.
Though, you're good about sitting and being quiet and making those encouraging comments and pointed comments, and those are things that Tyler needs to hear, and he needed to hear. And
I was glad, and Tyler, I had to come over here for the community out a year. They do this thing where they use the building neighborhood, I'm talking about. The neighborhood uses our building. So I had to come over here for that. And I was like, listen, I want you to know that I am against the wall. The whole community is waiting on me to show up at the building. And this happens once a year, and I just need to get them in the building to get tables and stuff. And I was like, would it be okay if Tyler does it? She's like, absolutely. Then it's like, she doesn't care who does it. She just got to have it done. And she was like, Tyler, do you mind? He was like, absolutely not. And I'd already told Tyler, like, bring your britches, bring your swapping britches. And
that's the whole thing, y'all. If you're a Christian today, you need to have a pair of swimming trunks ready, or whatever.
Waders or whatever you want to do, however you're going to do it. Or just be prepared to go home wet. Just make up your mind.
And if you're not, and here's another thing too, men of the church, leaders in the church, you need to have a class on how to baptize somebody, because the idea that the preacher's the only one who can do it, it's ludicrous.
Amen.
And that's one thing that's really pushed at Little Mountain Ministry Camp. It's a free camp, by the way, for daddies and preachers and elders and young boys, and 60 men come together, and we're trying to add a second year to it. Anyways, look that up, 1615ministries.com, Little Mountain Ministry Camp. And then there's also Camp Mariah for that too, for the ladies. But also, that was one of the things is we've taught our young men how to baptize somebody. We go to the pool and we say, all right, here's 30 minutes. Here's what you say. Here's how you do it. And they sit there and they dunk each other for 30 minutes. It's not a baptism. It's a training ground. Most
and there's
already been baptized before.
And the blessing is there's no magic formula. You got to, there's no magic words you got to say over it or anything like that.
They got to be buried.
They got to be buried. And that's the only thing I told Tyler. He's like, well, what? I was like, only thing, like if you watch most of the baptism pictures or videos or something like that, I'm looking at their feet because I know in my hands, I'm holding their head. I'm holding your head and I'm going to get you down. Most people are not going to be I'll be able to at least mechanically advantage. I have to lean backwards. I can get you back up, but your feet may come up. And so if you watch and I baptize most people, absolutely. I'm actually looking at their feet when I'm doing it.
Mm-hmm. And there's this is a cool thing. Carson been studying with his friend since last November, off and on. When we come into town, and him and Gunner have really been studying. I showed up to pick him up from work the other night at 9:00 at night, and he's sitting at the kitchen table with. They were actually getting a game plan of another guy who had been riding the tractor with Carson, who was coming to try to learn how to work, and Carson's planting seeds with him, and then him and Dusty start planting some waters those seeds. And anyways, they're talking to this guy about salvation, and then they're getting a game plan of how they're going to strategize, what to do and verses and those kind of things. And so Carson and Dusty's tag team, and these guys are coming to work with them. So, well, Gunner's in there too, and he's listening, and then they're studying or whatever. Well, they're selling corn this past Saturday, and I don't know if they had a lunch break or whatever, but Carson just hit up Gunner. He's like, "So what do you not know about the gospel?" He's like, "Nothing." He's like, "Well, what's holding you back?" And then it was just like, it was one of them moments. He's just like, "Well, I don't know." And so, man, they shut down the whole corn operation to go down to the creek. And, but anyways, you said that Carson baptizing him, and he's looking back at his feet, to make sure his feet are down. And that's another thing too, that, this is a sign of the church that's alive, is when we got to quit teaching our teens just to hold on. We've got to teach our teens to be the ones who are bringing people into the fold of God. And here
they can do a so much better job than we can.
Absolutely.
Because they don't have responsibilities, and all this stuff.
We're not talking about one or two kids here. I want you to understand something. In the last 15 months, I calculated this up today. In the last 15 months, 5 boys from KW have baptized one of their friends. The last 15 months. Now you think about that church, and I don't care where you're at. I don't care how many members you got at your church. Ask yourself this one question: Are our youth, are they baptizing their friends? Because if they're not, then you need to step it up, because and you need to have those training grounds. There's loads of things. Salvation is not just about a child's vertical relationship with God. The cross goes vertical and horizontal. We also have to be the people to reach. And Christ stretched out his hands as far as he could, not just to hang on the cross, but to gather as many people as he could to bring with him. And so you got to ask yourself, if you're an elder in a church, if you're a leader, or if you're a person who's sitting by as a member, and you say, okay, are our youth, are they baptizing their friends? Are they bringing friends to Jesus? And I don't mean, and it starts with bringing them to the camp, to the s'mores at the fires or.
So let's talk about that. That's an important component. So we're drinking through a fire hose. I know you get going. I do this. I do the same thing, and so I'm gonna do like you do to me. Let's bring it back around. And the reason why our kids can be better evangelists, I reckon, to degree that we are sometimes, is because our kids think they got so much they got to do. They ain't hardly got to do anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, my boys, my kind of free time project the last 2 weeks is I've been pulling my truck bed off my Super Duty, because it's got holes in it big enough to put your football through. And so I watch Aiden or Carson or somebody like that up in there, and that thing is doing this number. I was like, somebody's going to thump right through that, and we're going to be ending up with stitches, and 20 stitches up a calf muscle. So I pulled the bed off the Super Duty, and then
20 stitches up a what?
Calf muscle, up your leg muscle.
Okay, I was thinking about cattle.
A calf up your calf muscle. And so I pulled the bed off, and we've been taking our free time an hour or two here a day, and like, okay, fabbing the brackets, wiring the, you got under this thing. It was a mess of the lights. We're just going to start over. We're going to do it our way. I put 2 cameras on my truck. Didn't have a camera on my truck. Putting, LED lights, just all the things I think I would like to have on my truck, and so, your boys.
And you're fabricating this bed, right?
I was going to, and oddly enough, there was a dude on Facebook that had one down here at Slidell, and about an hour south of us here, that he had it on a wreck Super Duty. He needed the motor out of it, but didn't need the bed. Well, I just needed the bed.
Chris probably got it for $8, man. Or the guy probably paid Chris $8 to come get it.
Well, I got it from him, and I'm happy with what I paid for it. We'll just say that. And I come on back up now. It was a mess. I'm going to tell you, this old boy, listen, this is like a Jerry Clare story. He was so cross-eyed that I couldn't tell if he was looking at me or Aiden standing there. And
he's the one that built the bed?
No, he was getting the motor out of it, but he had a skid steer that we was trying to pick this thing up with. And this old boy, I'm telling you, Bob, I felt so sorry for him. He couldn't tell him for nothing. One eye was looking at his nose and the other one was looking at his ear. And I was like, I couldn't tell if he was saying, get the strap, he was talking to me or Aiden. So every time he'd issue a command, I'd just say, go get the strap. That way I wouldn't have to make him feel bad by saying, you talking to me or Aiden? I just say, I just give that command to Aiden.
He was probably saying 2 beds.
That's why he was selling it so cheap. I got 2 of them. When I left, he's like, he took them both.
And, hey, y'all, this is the only podcast you can get information like this from, just right off the cuff.
And I mean,
he making stuff up.
He busted the windshield out of the skid steer, getting that thing on there. I told Alan went with me, Alan Morrow, and I was like, wonder what'll get, the back glass of the truck or the skid steer windshield. Got the skid steer.
That dude's on fire right now, isn't he?
Oh, man, absolutely, man. I'm telling you, he is it's an amazing thing. That's another symptom of whether you're growing.
New Christian right there.
And so anyways, I come back, we're doing the beds. Anyways, long story short, the kids are always like, when you go in and you're like, all right, boys, y'all get done with your schoolwork, whatever it is, I'll be back 2:00. I need 2:00 to this time. We're going to work on the bed. We're going to do it for 3 hours. Like yesterday, I got home. I was studying. Actually, interestingly enough, I had a Bible study. It started at like 11:30, and I didn't get home till after 2 because I was studying with this lady that we baptized Tuesday, her husband now. And he came to me Sunday night and was like, hey, and you're just the whole tears in your eyes scenario. Like, we've done this a lot, tried churches, and there's just something different now. And what's different is that we're only getting the Bible. And so I know there's a truth, but I just need help finding it. And you're like, you can work with that. And so I went over to their house to study with him yesterday. Well, I got back home, and we worked from then until, supper time. I was trying to grill chicken and work on the bed at the same time. Well, the reason why your kids can do so much more, I say all that to say this, is that I tell them, like, we're going to work on the bed for 2 or 3 or 4 hours, whatever it is. And it's like, oh, man, I got to work on the bed with Daddy for 3 hours. And it's like, you ain't done nothing all day. I mean, you did your schoolwork, you did your chores, you did your little things, but the rest of the time, y'all out here shooting basketball, fishing, riding the side-by-sides around. You've got the rest of the day that you can do whatever you want to do, but when it's 3 hours. And so that's why, as adults, now listen, I'm going to say this, and I don't want this to be anybody's excuse, because I'm not offering an excuse, I'm offering a reason, that as adults, we have responsibilities. You got to raise your kids. You got to take care of your family. You got to put food on the table, whatever that means. If you got to shuck corn, shoot deer, whatever that means, you got to put food on the table. So that naturally takes time. I get it. That does not absolve you of the responsibility of teaching, reaching the lost with the gospel. All I'm saying is because you have those responsibilities, you do not have as much time. Your kids have so much more time on their hands. So that's why you remember, whoever you are listening to this, when you were 17 or 18 or 19, you had all these friends, all these, unless you're, socially, kind of introvert or whatever. But I had tons of friends that I hung out with, fished with, hunt with, played ball with, went to races. I mean, all these things, rode motorcycles together, all these friends. Why? Well, it's because I had free time. So if we're going to be a church that's going to be a growing church and not a dying church, we've got to have a way that we can vibrantly get the youth to participate. Now, whatever that means, I don't know what that means, but your congregation has to ask and answer.
You might have to plan something, but sometimes you just go, hey, what do y'all want to do?
That's right.
And do it with them. Yeah.
Your kids, if they like something, they will invite their friends. Period.
Absolutely. And here's something too that was neat. Ben, why don't you tell our listeners about the basketball goal at KW?
Oh yeah. So in my neighborhood on Facebook, they posted one of my neighbors just posted, hey, I got this free basketball goal if somebody wants to come pick it up. Well, I went and picked it up. We put it over here by the bus barn, and now.
Describe the basketball goal too to our listeners.
Well, it's really cheap looking. There's nothing to it. I think the backboard's even crooked. We had to. It's all.
It's a Bobo basketball goal.
It's a Bobo basketball goal. It was a free basketball goal. Okay, right. It was for free.
Exactly.
So we put it over,
you can't peel those kids away from that basketball goal.
No, and they'll bring their friends to the youth class, and they'll hit the basketball goal, right after class, and they'll be there for 20, 30 minutes, and then when their parents say, "Oh, it's time to go," they're like, "Golly."
Yeah, I mean, my kids bring their shorts to change into to go play basketball after church,
and it's a free basketball goal. There's no,
right.
And you can, if you pull up at KW sometime between 20 minutes till and 5 minutes till, there's somebody out there shooting basketball. You got to dodge basketballs. If it's an afternoon or evening
Don't park near the basketball goal.
Right, exactly. We welcome our visitors, but we just want you to understand you might accidentally get a dent.
Well, there's a reason why the visitor parking is on the other side.
There you go. That's right. Well, your kids, we got to understand something, that we have a wrong expectation of our kids, and a lot of that is due to the culture that we live in. We think that the height of getting our kids to be faithful in the Lord is making sure they're informed. That's not the truth. That is not. I mean, that is a component of it,
but it's not all of it.
That's exactly right. It does not mean that our kids are well informed. Sure, they need to be well informed, but I want you to ask yourself a question. If you're a listener, when is the last time you had a Bible study with somebody, and what holds you back? What are the reasons why you're not having Bible studies? Now, if you are, and I hope that you are, having Bible studies, and you're trying to teach people the gospel actively, what got you started? And think about the growth process you had to go through. Think about if you're 42 like me, and have really only been evangelistic for the last 13 or 14 years of your life. You've been a Christian for 20. You spent the first 6 or 7, and you taught a handful of people, less than 5 probably, the gospel.
Is it okay for me to share what your about your dad? I mean, your biological dad?
Yeah, go ahead.
Faith? Yeah, and the thing about Chris is our listener need to know too, is Chris' daddy was an atheist. And so let that marinate with you for a little bit. And so there's praise God that your mama got taught the gospel.
That's right.
And she went all in with Jesus.
That's right.
And so that's passing down this part, but so you can do this.
That's right. And so you think about this. You step it back to our kids. You take our kids that are 13, 14, 15, 16 years old, and we think it's good if we can get them to get up and sing Jesus Loves Me. I got you. That's great. Mm-hmm. But, however, you're going to have kids like I will get up and lead singing. I'm not scared to lead singing. I sound like I'm squalling a duck. And so, you just got to realize I'm not saying this because I want to get out of it. I'll do it. I've done it a lot. But I'm just not good at it. I know that. But I can tell you this, that because I've done it a lot, I don't mind getting up and doing it. I just know I'm not going to be good at it. I'm not scared to do it. However,
you're not good at it in your standards or what you think that the world's standards, but in God's standards, if you getting up and doing that, man, he's saying that dude's being faithful and he's using what he's got for my glory. Because when you think that God doesn't want to hear your voice
Oh, he
He
gave it to
created
me.
it.
Yeah.
He's the one that created it. He
That's
wants to
right.
hear it.
You're
That's
a lot
right.
better than me and Bob when you sing Spanish songs.
Absolutely. Yeah. Chris is the best Spanish songwriter at KW. So, I mean, that's
I'll
just the
say that.
truth,
I'll
Chris.
agree with that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're the best Spanish songwriter.
Yeah.
So,
But you know, you take your
you went
kids.
from worst to best.
There you go. You just got to find your niche, man. It's like there's somebody who's the best jump roper in the world, you know, but they probably still have a 9-to-5 job. You know, nobody's going to sell tickets to watch a guy jump up and down in one spot, swing a rope underneath him, you know. But at the end of the day, if we have our kids actively engaged in we have an environment. If your church wants to grow, if you want to be a symptom of a church that's growing and thriving, this is what you need to have. A component of this is have your youth group have a place where your youth group want to come. They will bring their friends. I guarantee it. If it is not a place where your kids don't want to bring their friends, something's wrong. We had a member here that came to me and said, "I'm so glad this is a place where I'm not scared to bring my friends." She said, "I felt like the congregations I was at before kind of held me back because I never knew if they were going to be friendly. I never knew what they were going to." And so I just asked her, you know, when
Be the most friendly church. If you can't do anything else, be the friendliest.
Well, I even asked her because, you know, I thought about this with regards to our youth group. Like when she said, "There's nothing now that, you know, I'm so excited to have somebody where I can invite people." And I said, "Okay." She said, "If you saw the church as limiting you before, are you limiting the church?
Holding you back now?
What's limiting the church here now? You know,
Yeah.
you are part of our limitation. So, you know, your kids will naturally do this. They will invite their friends. I mean, shoot, with the beach retreat, I think Aiden's got 3 kids going with him this year that aren't members of the church.
And that was the goal. And so here's something for leadership. In 2019, we started a thing called Seaside with a Savior. Our elders said we want to put a place to where we're in KW, a congregation of roughly 200 to 230 at the time had a $24,000 budget for their youth. And this isn't just to go play games, but everything was set aside to say, we want to teach kids how to teach the gospel. And that was the goal with you coming in as with the evangelism side, helping to preach, us sharing the pulpit, me shifting over to the youth. That was the goal, was we want to teach kids how to be evangelistic. And so our elders, I said, okay, well, I want to take them to a beach house. And they said, that's fine. And so you can get your kids. You had an eldership who said, we're going to rent a beach house for a weekend so that lessons could be taught to our children, and so that authentic, organic Bible studies can take place with kids and then, you know, whatever adults are there with the kids. So you tell me this. How many kids do you think would invite their friends and go, "Hey, you want to go to the beach for the weekend? It's free."
Yeah. All you got to do
it's $25, you know?
Right.
No, man, I'm sorry, I can't do that. You know, well, when you're 3 hours away from the beach, they're like, yeah, we're going, you know, and next thing you know, we're renting 2 beach houses. We got a guy's house and a girl's house. And now we'd reached a pretty big, you know, pinnacle with the youth. I mean, we had 8 seniors that graduated last year. And so we'd reached a high.
That was an expensive Sunday.
But,
That was an expensive Sunday for the Donovans.
That was an expensive graduation Sunday. But man, it's so worth it. And you think about all those kids who are, you know, one of those kids just texted me right now, and guess what they're wanting to do? They're saying, I'm getting real serious with this person, and I want them to be a member of the church. And they said, but they've already agreed that if we're serious in a relationship, that we're going to go. And they said, hey, he's going to come with me. She's going to come with me, whatever. But I don't want them to come with me just because they love me. I want them to come with me because they know the truth. And so now they're wanting to strategize. Well, I mean, all these kids, that they're striving to be soul winners. And so we got to change the culture. There's some powerful things when you think about how much time we got.
We got about 10 minutes.
Okay. So here's here's something I want everybody to think about. And I challenged the church this past Sunday morning, and I want you to think how many Andrew the disciple, how many big Andrew stories do you know in the Bible? And then think about Peter. Like, okay, how many Peter stories come to your mind? Well, everybody starts shooting off Peter. You know, Peter walked on water. Peter preached the first sermon. 3,000 souls are baptized. You know, Peter's walking the streets. You know, by the time him and John go to the temple and
Peter confessed him as Christ first.
Huh?
Yeah, Matthew 16. He was the first one. Jumped out the crowd.
Confessed Jesus. You know, John 6. You know, we've come to believe and to know that you're the Christ. Who else are we going to go to, Lord? You're the one with eternal life, you know. And then, you know, Peter speaks up about how often should I forgive my brother? You know, 7 times. Peter's always talking. And a lot of these things were clicking with him. You know, Peter and Cornelius' house, they're laying people on the streets just so they can get under the shadow of Peter. Somebody brought up the church. Peter's an elder in the church. Well, all these different things. Well, I said, okay, I want you to think between the end of Bible class and end of the sermon, end of worship, tell me how many Andrew stories that you got. Well, there's pretty much 4 times that Andrew is mentioned in the Bible. You got Andrew is there in John 12. This was our back in the saddle, that lesson, you know. So somebody came to Philip and they said, some Greeks said, sirs, we wish to see Jesus. They came to say that to Philip. Philip went and got Andrew, and Andrew and Philip went to Jesus and told him. Then Jesus begins to teach. Okay, big story, right? No. Then it's Andrew's one of the ones in one of the gospel accounts where, well, Lord, this boy's got 5 loaves and 2 fish right here. He's got a lunch. Well, so Andrew says that to Jesus. So Andrew is one of these behind the scene guys, but he's there. In Acts 1, we see where Andrew's still there post-resurrection. Well, but here's the thing. In John 1, Andrew is the one that brings Peter to Jesus. And so you may be thinking, well,
and he was there before. You know, he was a disciple of John first. So you see that.
He's a disciple of John.
You know, he was all in with the Lord long before he was all in with I mean.
Before he saw the Messiah.
That's right.
He was waiting on the Messiah. When John said, behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world, Andrew begins following Jesus. And he comes and gets his brother and says, we found the Messiah, the one who the prophet spoke about. And he brings Peter to Jesus. And now I don't know if Jesus ever commented anything to Andrew or not. It's not recorded. But when Andrew brings Peter to Jesus, Jesus immediately addresses Peter. And Jesus knows people's potential. But Andrew was not the one who was going to speak up and boldly speak before the thousands. Andrew wasn't going to be the one who's going to have the faith to get out of the boat and walk on the water. But here's the thing. Andrew brought his brother to Jesus. And his brother was going to be the one. But Andrew, even though Andrew couldn't speak or didn't speak before the thousands, Andrew still had the responsibility as a follower of God, as the same responsibility that Peter did, and that was to bring souls to Jesus. And that's exactly what Andrew did. And Andrew says, hey, we found him, and he brought him to Jesus.
Yeah, that's that principle of the seed principle. You can count the seeds in an apple, but not the apples in a seed. And so you just have to realize that, you know, if you're going to be part of a church that's growing and thriving, there's got to be movement. There's got to be action. There's just this, you know, you started it out that same way with John 3:16. You know, there's this powerful thing in Hebrews 11:6 that without faith, that's the noun form of the same word, pistis, the Greek word, that is impossible to please him. For he that comes to God, action, must believe.
Comes to God.
That's right. Yeah. That's the action. Must believe, pisteo. That is the Greek, same word, noun, verb. It's just, here's the question. If I say I'm going to go, I got some Google today, you know that I'm talking about.
Pisteo is the verb. Pistis is the noun, right?
Pisteo. Yes. Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. And so if I say I got some Google.
Yes.
I bought the stock. I own part of Google. I own the noun form. If somebody says, hey, how many, liters, what is it? Cups are in a gallon or ounces are in a gallon or something. I don't know. Google it.
128.
Yeah, it's 128. I just had to look this up the other day because I was buying paint to paint the bed with, and I was trying to figure out would it be cheaper to buy the rattle cans or to buy a gallon of paint? What would be the difference?
Yeah.
I had
know which one will make your finger feel better.
Yeah. Well, anyways, you're right. But you can take a little bit of finger hurting if it's a lot cheaper, though.
I love it when Chris's mind goes. Sorry for making your mind go away to your finger.
But the fact of the matter is that what you got to see is action, and it's the right kind of action. So your youth group is a component. Now you may say, well, we don't have any youth. Well, I can promise you that you can. You can have youth. And the way that you have youth is being an attractive place that can have them. We're not talking about laser light shows. We're not talking about, I don't care if you're a church of all gray hairs. Please don't take that in a disrespectful way. But I can promise you that you can understand, you can provide something in some kind of way for the community, because all it will take is one. You're still thinking in hundreds. You still you think in one. You think in seeds. That's all you need to think about is seeds. You think in one seed. Period.
Well, and here's the thing: is people think, okay, I would invite the youth if they were there. Well, okay, here's what you need to do: is this, and this is the next litmus test, and we probably need to. This can segue into next week, but really, what it boils down to, why many churches are dying, is because discipleship is not there.
All right, we need to talk about this next week, because I thought we were talking about this week, but we didn't get there.
All right, so here's what we're going to talk about next week: discipleship and mentorship.
There you go.
And so you need to. This is what you need. So it'll be part 2 of whatever this title is or whatever. But discipleship and mentorship, and so the bottom line, what you need is you can create this, and we're going to teach you how next week.
Amen. Hey, we appreciate you guys joining us. We'll see you next week.
This is the Unscripted.